In the dark room, several candles burned on a nightstand. Between them lay a pillow with a necklace on it. It was a dainty piece of jewelry with a twisted rim adorned with 3 purple crystals. A moment, and the necklace was gone. At the same instant, there was a loud shout. "Thief! Grab him!" Along with the shout came rapid footsteps. Someone was fleeing from the scene of the crime. Realizing that he couldn't do without magic, the boy concentrated the power of the wind in his palm. A vortex appeared above his hand, and the air rushed towards it, obeying the wizard. With a sudden movement, he directed the airstream toward the guards, clearing his path. As the guards soared through the air under the force of the elements, the wind mage calmly ran forward. Using gusts of wind to accelerate, Noah deftly avoided danger. Sliding to the ground, he remembered his mother's words, begging him never to use magic. But he couldn't keep his promise. Her debts hung on him. Jumping up, Noah Harrington smiled happily. He had to deal with the city's problems because of the family's 50,000 gold debt. After hiding the stolen goods, Noah first headed to the local tavern, famous for its excellent beer. The tavern owner, wiping a beer cup, suddenly heard quick, loud footsteps outside the door. He sighed heavily and muttered quietly, "I told you to be careful." At the same moment, the door swung open with a rumble, and Noah flew into the tavern. The wood creaked so hard that the tavern owner noted that the door would break a little more. Noah Harrington, as if nothing had happened, stepped confidently forward toward the tavern owner. The man noticed that Noah did it faster than he expected. Meanwhile, the boy put a necklace with purple crystals on the table and asked him to evaluate it. The tavern owner placed a pouch with 50 gold pieces in front of him, but Noah loudly expressed his displeasure. Pointing his finger at the man, he shouted indignantly, "Do you have any idea how many guards I had to wade through? I would have been better off selling it directly." The owner only turned away and suggested that he decide that for himself. Suddenly the door swung open and someone's silhouette appeared in the opening. The man greeted the guest warmly. Noah turned around and looked at the woman who had entered. As she came closer, she indicated that she wanted to inquire about her errand. The tavern owner handed her the necklace for appraisal. The old woman thanked him from the bottom of her heart, saying that it was the only heirloom left from her daughter. Then she again expressed her gratitude for his help. She handed over a basket of fresh bread as a thank you, apologizing that her family wasn't rich enough to repay with something more valuable. The man assured her that there was nothing to worry about and added that the Reshala would also be grateful to her. He also emphasized that if she needed help, she could contact him at any time. He promised to help her in any way he could, to which the old woman bowed low in response. As the woman left, Noah grudgingly teased the owner, "Reshala would be most grateful to you as well. Feel free to contact me anytime." Then he took a bite of bread and remarked that he was doing the work and only the tavern owner was benefiting. The man frowned and said that revealing Noah's true identity could cause serious problems. If a commoner used magic, he would immediately be mobilized and sent to the battlefield, so the young man should be careful to avoid his father's mistakes. Noah reluctantly agreed, and then asked to be assigned something really big. The tavern owner thought for a moment, then silently placed a toy red wolf in front of Noah. Noah looked at her squeamishly and asked incredulously if the man was joking since he was entrusting him with the delivery of the doll. But as soon as the owner mentioned the payment of 10,000 gold pieces, Noah changed dramatically. He smiled and asked, "Where shall I deliver it?" The man said the address was Renee Academy, room 404 in the girls' dormitory. Hearing this, Noah immediately objected, reminding him that no one had penetrated that place yet. He then threw the doll back. The tavern owner caught the toy and added that a 10,000 gold bonus awaited Noah if he was successful. Upon hearing such an amount, the guy grabbed the doll without a second thought and, anticipating riches, joyfully declared, "I am the exception." With a wide smile, he reminded that he had great strength, so he could be relied on. Later that night, Noah sat on a rock watching the city. He pondered the fact that giving up the chance to infiltrate the academy was insane. At first glance, the wizards and engineers who control the elements seem like geniuses, but really they are all crazy people who can't be trusted. The mere thought of the summoners and the creatures they summoned made Noah shudder with horror. He tossed from side to side, trying to make the right decision. But the debt was weighing on him, and in the end he decided not to miss the chance to earn money. Holding the doll in his hand, Noah remembered that he should give it to the dark-haired, red-eyed girl in room 404 of the women's dormitory. Soon, he made his way up to the roof of the building. However, to his disappointment, he found a magical barrier around the dormitory. Taking a closer look, Noah realized that the academy's large-scale protective dome was surprisingly flimsy. Noah concentrated wind magic, creating a powerful vortex around his palm. He smirked, watching the bright stream of air coming from his hand. "Something that weak won't stop me," he remarked. Directing the wind currents at the barrier, Noah easily made his way inside. Cautiously, he crept up to the window of the dormitory and deftly climbed in. Once inside the girls' dormitory, he looked around nervously, searching for a dark-haired girl with red eyes. But seeing two girls with dark hair in the room at once, Noah froze in confusion. He grabbed his head and sat down, contemplating how to proceed. Waiting until morning was not something he could do. Looking at the doll, the guy wondered if it would be enough to just leave it here for the right girl to figure out on her own. But Noah decides otherwise. He is called a solver, which means he must complete the task. As he approached one of the girls, he thought he should open her eyelid and check the color of her eyes. With hands trembling with exertion, he reached for her face. Carefully opening the sleeping woman's eyelid, Noah saw that her eyes were red in color. He smiled happily, having finally found the one he was looking for. But the happiness did not last long. The girl suddenly opened her other eyelid, looked at him angrily, and asked, "Who just opened my eyelid?" Noah looked at her awkwardly and muttered, "Are you awake?" The enraged student jumped up from the bed and struck her fist with force. But Noah reacted in time, dodging the blow. The girl was stunned. Her swift attack failed to reach its target. Meanwhile, the other student was sleeping peacefully, unresponsive to the noise around her. Noah asked for a minute to explain. But the girl indignantly pointed out that not only had he broken into the girls' dormitory, but he was also looking at a sleeping person. Noah retorted that he was only doing what someone else asked him to do. But she understood his words in her own way and became even more furious. A flame flared in her palm. Noah clenched his fists and tried to justify himself by repeating that it wasn't what she thought it was. But the girl wouldn't even listen to him. The quiet corridor was suddenly filled with noise. Noah jumped out of the room. As he was rapidly fleeing, a massive explosion sounded behind him. In a panic, he quickened his step, trying to get away from his pursuer. But she wasn't about to let him go. She sprinted after him, easily closing the distance. The chase grew more and more tense. The girl almost caught up with him, and Noah, panting as he ran, tried to appeal to her mind. "Calm down. Let me explain." There was an angry shout in reply. "Shut up! You expect me to believe the words of an idiot?" Speeding away, Noah exclaimed loudly that he now understood why the reward for this task was so high. Tired of fleeing, he braked sharply with his hand on the floor, raising a cloud of dust. Smiling, Noah warned, if the chase didn't stop, he'd have to use magic. The girl ignored his words. Then Noah got into a fighting stance, raised his hand and began to gather air, creating a vortex above his palm. It soon reached enormous size, and Noah hurled it at his pursuer. But when he saw the scale of the attack, the guy got scared. He got nervous and lost control. With terrifying speed, the whirlwind rushed toward the girl. In the blink of an eye, it caught up with its target, kicking up a cloud of dust and debris into the air. Noah smiled awkwardly and began to apologize, feeling drops of sweat running down his face. Suddenly, he heard a ringing voice. "Wow, so you're a wizard." Those words made him wince. As the girl walked out of the dust clouds, she grinned. You wouldn't have been able to get through the Academy's protective barrier otherwise. At first, I was going to catch you and hand you over to the administration, but changed my mind." She smiled maliciously, looking at Noah with her scarlet glowing eyes. The mere sight of her made Noah involuntarily cringe. The sorceress pulled out her spellbook, held up her palm filled with magic, and cast the incantation. "Show yourself, Carlos." Noah opened his mouth in awe, looking at the creature that had appeared. In front of him stood a huge woolly beast that looked like an enlarged and frightening replica of the very wolf doll Noah was supposed to give to the student. The wolf opened its mouth and roared loudly, preparing to attack. At that moment, the girl stroked his fur and introduced herself. Eloise Elsigran. Noah asked in bewilderment why she had given her name. Eloise stepped between him and the beast and grinned. "I'm doing you a favor. At least you'll know who killed you before you die." A grin appeared on her face, and the wolf's eyes lit up with a bright red light. Eloise promised that Noah would die right here and now. Noah tensed, clenched his fists, and prepared to fight. In an instant, the huge wolf leapt up, spread its paws and released its claws, aiming directly at Noah. Noah shouted, saying that 10,000 gold for a fight with a summoner was not enough. At the very least, he demanded a premium for the risk. The wolf, seized with battle rage, attacks Noah with force, but he deftly dodges, swiftly avoiding the blow. At that moment, Noah had completely forgotten about the sorceress. Eloise intercepted him with a fiery palm and grinned. "Do you really think only a summoned beast is worth dodging?" Noah hurried away, realizing that if things continued like this, he would have no shelter and no way out. The next moment, Noah lost his balance and flew to the floor with incredible speed. For a few seconds, he slid with his arms out in front of him, trying to slow his fall somehow. Eloise Elsigran, already ready to release a fire spell, froze with her summoned beast, amazed at what was happening. Upon landing, Noah smiled awkwardly and said, "Oh, I really almost died." Without wasting time, Eloise used one of her trained spells and aimed at Noah's arm, but he managed to lift her up, causing her to miss. Realizing the deadly danger, Noah jumped up abruptly and ran with all his might. Enraged, Eloise began destroying everything in the fugitive's path with her spells. She got so carried away that she accidentally broke a window. Seeing his chance, Noah jumped out the window and hurried to escape. He subdued the air, allowing him to hover above the ground. But Eloise was not going to back down and rushed after him. Turning around, Noah shouted, "Stop following me! Am I the one who ruined everything?" Chasing after him, Eloise suddenly froze when she saw the magical barriers ahead. Noah, too, was stunned by their numbers. However, with his mastery of magic, he easily created airwaves to break through the defense. After touching the barrier, he rushed towards the window. In the blink of an eye, he broke through the glass and disappeared inside. Shaking off the shards of glass, Noah wondered, "Is this girl really a student, or is everyone here like that?" Suddenly, an elf appeared in front of him and asked in a menacing tone, "Who's making a commotion here?" Panicked, Noah turned to the elf and hurriedly apologized for his impoliteness. He explained his behavior by the fact that there was a scary monster outside. Then he smiled awkwardly and apologized for the broken window. The blonde elf stepped closer, looked down at him, and asked, "Aren't you going to reveal your identity?" Noah looked at the elf puzzled, not sure what he was getting at. Meanwhile, the elf raised his hand and stated that he wanted to hear Eloise's explanation. He used magic and temporarily removed the barrier so Eloise Elsegron could enter and tell her side of the story. As soon as the girl noticed the barrier disappearing, she immediately rushed inside. Bursting into the elf's house, she shouted loudly, "I apologize for the intrusion." The elf looked at Eloise, clearly displeased that they had made such a fuss. Angry, Eloise Elsegrun revealed that the blue-haired fool had snuck into her room in the middle of the night. But Noah did not let her finish and exclaimed indignantly, "Why do you call me a fool? Such behavior from Noah was inexcusable, so the elf decided to use magic to calm him down. He created a magical circle to unite the energy streams, and then directed the spell towards Noah, causing him to collapse to the floor. Under its influence, Noah felt a heaviness stiffening his body. He had no strength left to stand up. Eloise, pointing to herself, asked the principal to let her deal with the uninvited guest of the academy herself. The headmaster understood her feelings perfectly well, but according to the rules, students could not carry out punishments. Eloise tried to change the elf's mind and insist, but he looked at her menacingly and ordered in an angry voice, "Go back!" The girl gritted her teeth, but realizing her position, decided not to insist. After a few seconds, she sighed heavily and replied briefly, "Okay." While the principal held Noah on the floor, Eloise turned around abruptly and, clenching her fists, headed swiftly for the dormitory. She wasn't happy, but she didn't dare to argue with the principal. Noah rested his cheek against the floor, feeling gravity pressing down on him, not allowing him to move. After a couple of minutes, the headmaster calmed down and decided to talk to the boy straight. The elf was well aware that Noah was not a student of the academy, but he was still interested in what had happened between him and Eloise. Noah decided to lie, saying that he had just gotten lost because the academy was too big. But the headmaster immediately objected that it was not the kind of place you could wander into by accident. The elf frowned, looked at Noah judgmentally, and demanded that he speak only the truth. Noah Harrington made himself comfortable, grinned, and said, "Uncle, I'm not such a dangerous man. I'm not stupid." When the principal asked who ordered him to sneak into the girls' dormitory in the middle of the night, Noah looked away and hummed a tune, trying to avoid answering. Soon the elf reached for the kettle. At the same moment, he said calmly that he would not question Noah again. He didn't care where he'd come from or how he'd ended up here. Pouring tea into a green mug, the headmaster sternly remarked that regardless of the reason, breaking into the academy was a serious crime. And he, as the head of the academy, couldn't just turn a blind eye to it. Tossing a sugar cube into his tea, the elf added that his duty was not only to keep order, but also to find talent. He noted that Noah was able to break down the barriers set up here. That means he has good abilities, and the director approves of that. The principal, throwing sugar cubes into the mug, calmly explained, Noah had two choices. Either he goes to the academy and discovers his hidden talent, or he spends the rest of his life rotting in prison like a criminal. When the elf uttered the last option, the sugar cubes fell into the tea with a thud, raising a splash. Noah Harrington lowered his head thoughtfully. He had never imagined that one day he would be faced with such a choice. After a little thought, he said that he had something to say too. Then he remarked that even in a benefit there must be a measure, and here something clearly did not add up. The student was trying to catch a trespasser, and the principal, on the contrary, chased her away to make a deal. Noah squinted, and wondered if the elf realized the strangeness of what was happening. It sounded tempting to join the academy, but it was obvious that the headmaster wanted to put him on some kind of errand. The boy smirked, created a small vortex in his palm, and grinned. I may look bad now, but outside of the academy I'm pretty famous. To prove his words, he made a show of force, and one of the windows shattered with a clatter. Noah smiled broadly and remarked that rumors of his infiltration of the academy would only increase his value. The elf looked at him thoughtfully and asked what exactly he was trying to accomplish. Noah replied that if the headmaster wanted to keep him at the academy, he would have to pay a decent price. Noah answered that if the headmaster wanted to keep him at the academy, he would have to pay a decent price. Noah laughed and asked with a cheeky grin, "Well, how about it? Ready for a deal like that, Uncle?" The elf frowned even harder as he considered the offer. The terms were clearly not in his favor, but it might be worth the gamble. While the academy director was talking to Noah, Eloise El-Sagrun headed back to the dormitory. Entering room 404, the girl sighed heavily. She had almost caught up with this guy, but she hadn't expected him to dare enter the headmaster's house at all. Eloise slammed the door shut with force, causing her roommate to wake up and jump up in fright. Frowning, she wondered. This idiot was just wasting his talent. Instead of a worthy use, he was only using it to get through the headmaster's barrier. Walking to the bed, Eloise grabbed the blanket. She needed to sleep now because tomorrow was the midterm, and she needed to regain her strength. But suddenly her gaze fell on a wolf-shaped doll. She took it in her hands and examined it carefully. Eloise was greatly surprised. She remembered exactly that she had left the doll at home and had not taken it with her. Time passed. A few hours later, night changed today. It was time for the midterm exam. The students were excitedly discussing what it would be like. Some were nervously repeating the material, while others were yawning, complaining of boredom, and almost falling asleep on their desks. Eloise El-Sagrun entered the lecture room. Her appearance caused a wave of whispering, and discussions began behind her back. Many people were annoyed that she was the heiress of the despicable Sagrun family, and was always in first place. Eloise herself had no sympathy for her classmates. Their low self-esteem and constant gossip only irritated her. As she sat down in her seat, the girl heard her family being discussed again behind her back. The students whispered that the Sagrun family supposedly opposed the king, pretended to be noble, but in reality consisted of cowards. However, those who spread these rumors didn't dare to say it to Eloise's face. So who is really the coward here? Suddenly she felt a tingling sensation in her fingers. When she lowered her gaze, Eloise saw that someone was messing with her with a spell. The girl shrieked in fear. Instead of her fingers, she saw several colorful snakes, their mouths opened, as if preparing to bite. Eloise stood out among the students, drawing too much attention to herself. Many did not miss the opportunity to gloat, especially taking advantage of magic contracts. Suddenly a notice sounded in the auditorium. All the students were asked to gather in the arena. Eloise El-Sagrun rose silently and headed for the door. The girl's fingers were now snakes instead of fingers, and she laughed loudly. She stopped quietly, closed her eyes, and blew lightly on them. At the same moment, the snakes went limp and turned into normal fingers. Her magic worked instantly, and everything returned to normal. When Eloise left the classroom, the laughter of the students did not stop. Some thought she had run away in shame. Others suggested that she wanted to get extra credit. One of the students laughed so hard that he even complained of a stomachache. But suddenly a strange, pungent odor filled the classroom. The students coughed, not understanding where it came from. However, the foul odor was not the only problem. One girl, covering her nose, asked her friend, "Hey, what's wrong with your eyes?" The guy didn't immediately realize what he was talking about, but soon panic gripped the audience. Everyone now had one huge eye, like a cyclops. Realizing who was behind it, the guy with purple hair shrieked, "Eloise!" The arena was illuminated by a floating magic crystal, surrounded by bleachers and decorated with the Academy's emblem. Eloise was already sitting proudly in her seat, and the teacher looked back at the door and wondered, why didn't anyone come? A few seconds later, the students abruptly swung open the arena door. The students appeared on the threshold, but their faces were distorted. Each had one huge eye, like a cyclops. At this moment, Eloise El-Sagrun thanked the beast-like teacher for allowing her to use the magic weapon that dispelled magic and got rid of the snakes on her fingers. Professor Mim grabbed the magic weapon and asked, "Eloise has snakes growing out of her finger. What about you? Has the dungeon opened up?" She then fired a magic cannon directly into the students' faces to restore their former appearance. After that, she sternly stated that if she ever saw them using magic for pranks, she would immediately lower their grades. She then loudly announced the start of the exam. Meanwhile, Noah strolled through the corridors of the academy, joyfully humming a tune, and was pleased because with an academic education, his services would become much more expensive. Plus, he'll get a generous scholarship. That's how Noah looked for copper and found gold. Noah clenched his fists and smiled broadly. He was happy, because after paying off his debts after his studies, he would finally be free. But at the same second, a beastman slammed right into the guy. Noah stood up and asked cautiously, "Oh, are you okay?" After a moment, the beastman grabbed Noah's arm and asked why he looked so relaxed. He grabbed Noah's hand and, noticing that he was also late, led him behind him, and Noah asked, puzzled, "Where are you late for?" Stopping, the beastman turned his head and explained that there was a midterm exam today. Surprised at what he heard, Noah interjected, "A midterm?" Meanwhile, the arena was already buzzing with students practicing and demonstrating their magical abilities in front of the professor. Noah and the beastman looked out from behind the door and breathed a sigh of relief, realizing they weren't too late for long. But then, seeing one student being carried on a stretcher because of severe injuries, the boys got excited again. Noah asked the zookeeper what had happened, and he countered with, "What do you mean?" Suddenly, Noah heard the professor shout loudly, "Stop! The duel is over!" Noah was startled. He could not believe that such battles were called examinations, for to him, they were more like fights. His companion, noticing the newcomer, asked, "Who are you?" Noah gave his name and explained that he transferred today. His animal companion was amazed that someone could transfer in the middle of the semester. He grinned sarcastically and added that Noah was very lucky because he would have to take the midterm exam right after his transfer. He then asked if Noah knew the rules of the exam. Noah scratched the back of his head awkwardly and, averting his gaze, honestly admitted that he didn't know the rules of the midterm exam. His companion then declared that Noah looked like a promising student and began to explain the rules. "The thrown ball will turn into the knight you are to fight. There are 7 colors in all: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple." Showing on his fingers, he noted that the difficulty increases with each step overcome. It was the next contestant's turn, and he threw the ball into the center of the arena. After a moment, the ball began to transform, and smoke rose up around it. From the puffs of smoke, a sinister dark knight with burning violet eyes appeared, clutching a giant blade and an axe. The dark knight, shrouded in purple flames, straightened up to his full height, displaying his massive armor with a golden emblem on his chest. It was time for Eloise Elsegran to demonstrate her magical skills at the midterm exam. Eloise, with icy concentration, sat riding a giant firewolf equipped with massive shields and prepared for battle, radiating confidence and strength. Noah was amazed to see a female student riding a huge wolf. He looked closely and realized without a doubt that the same crazy girl from yesterday was in front of him again. The Beastman explained that Stage 6 was now underway, and Eloise would probably handle it without difficulty. Noah interjected, "Easily?" And the Beastman noted that Eloise was the Academy's top student, much to his surprise. Feeling excited and gritting his teeth, Noah muttered, "Looks like she's really strong." At this time, Eloise Elsegran resolutely rode her huge beast towards the enemy. She conjured a small flame in her palm, intending to throw it at the knight. After a second, she hurled flames at the enemy, then unleashed several more volleys of fire. The spheres of fire flew at lightning speed at the knight. Soon they reached their target. When they hit the armor, the balls exploded, bursting into a blinding flame. The fire had incapacitated the knight. Charred wires were sticking out of his arms. At the same instant, a huge wolf jumped up close and grabbed the knight by the neck with its paw. The red beast roared loudly, baring its giant fangs. Its eyes flashed with scarlet light. The beast squeezed the knight's neck, causing the armor to crack, and then grasped the top of his helmet with its other paw. In the next instant, he snapped the robot's head off with force. Red and blue wires were sticking out of the stump like veins. Noah was dumbfounded. He clenched his teeth and stared tensely at the arena, his pupils narrowed with fear. The knight's decapitated body collapsed to the floor, armor splintering. Eloise proudly fixed her hair and heard the expected words, "Eloise passes." Noah looked at Eloise with fear. He realized that if she had caught him yesterday, he would be in the place of the decapitated knight right now. The thought made him go cold. Suddenly, Eloise noticed Noah among the crowd. She hadn't expected to see him here, even in his student uniform. Catching her gaze, Noah smiled awkwardly, raised his palm and said, "Hey, geek." Eloise froze in shock and then became furious. No one dares call her crazy. Her entire body was enveloped in flames, and a fiery aura erupted around her fists. Looking angrily at Noah, she stated, "It looks like you want to finish yesterday's fight right now." At that moment, the professor's voice rang out. She sternly demanded that Eloise calm down and not make a fuss. Being in an exam, the student could not afford such behavior. Realizing this, Eloise awkwardly turned away and mumbled an apology. Professor Mim shifted her gaze to Noah and asked if he was the transfer student. The boy waved to the beast-like mentor and, introducing himself, said, "I'm Noah Harrington, but you can just call me Noah." Professor Meme explained that the first school day was not an exception for the midterm, so Noah would be next. In the meantime, it was Kadi's turn. Taking the ball in his hands, Kadi closed his eyes and whispered, "Heroes of Arya's noble and great predecessors, please." When he opened his eyes, he was glad to see a yellow ball in his hands. It meant that the test would be easy. Then, ready for the fight, he threw the ball into the arena. As before, a knight began to emerge from the ball. At first, only his dark silhouette was visible in the clouds of smoke. When the smoke cleared, a knight in dark gold armor with a massive sword became visible. Noah couldn't believe that such a small ball had turned into something so huge. At that moment, Kadi raised the magic cube upwards, and drawing the attention of the audience, presented his invention to them. Meanwhile, the knight rushed towards him, clutching his sword tightly. With each step, he sped up, preparing to attack. Kadi frantically assembled the cube, mumbling uncertainly that he was almost done. A few more seconds and the last piece fell into place. The cube was assembled correctly. As soon as Kadi collected the cube, he threw it at the approaching knight. The cube flew towards the enemy at high speed. As it slid along the ground, the facets of the cube glowed with a bright green light, emitting a distinctive sound. Then new cubes emerged from the small squares, which joining together formed a large figure. This figure had the ability to change shape. When it reached the knight, the cubes closed around him, completely restraining his movements. This caused him to drop his sword. Then the cube lifted the prisoner into the air and squeezed him even tighter. The teacher announced that Kadi had passed the exam. The boy shrieked with joy, celebrating his victory. Noah clapped his hands and grinned, saying that Kadi was a true gentleman, unlike the lady who had taken the exam before him. Hearing this, Eloise flared up with rage and exclaimed, "What? This one?" Professor Mim called for silence. Then, turning to Noah, she told him to enter the arena and show what he could do. Fully confident in his abilities, Noah prostrated himself and took a relaxed step forward. At this time, the students started discussing the newcomer. One of the guys asked his friend how strong he was, but the brown-haired girl just shrugged her shoulders, saying she didn't know. The principal was eagerly waiting for the transfer student to show his abilities. He had come to see Noah, though he had little interest in the other students' progress. When Professor Mim asked the principal why he was here, the elf smiled and replied, "What's so strange about a teacher deciding to visit a student?" Sticking his hand into the chest, Noah fumbled for the ball whose color would determine the difficulty of his challenge. He sincerely hoped he would get a weak opponent. Fumbling for the yellow ball, he was about to grab it, but at that moment, a purple ball rushed straight towards his hand. Noah instinctively caught it, but froze with surprise. How could the ball have chosen him? The boy was in a complete stupor for a few seconds. Pulling his hand out, he saw that he was holding a purple ball. There was a whisper in the auditorium. The students were talking about the fact that Noah had already failed the exam. There were rumors going around the academy that whoever got the purple ball would leave the arena half dead. Eloise sighed heavily as she stared at her desk and muttered that the first day of school would be the transfer student's last. Kadi covered his eyes with his paws in fear and muttered, "Oh, I can't look at it." Even Professor Mim was stunned. She hadn't seen the 7th battle stage in a very long time. Looking at the headmaster, she remarked that she didn't know Noah's level of training and thought it was too dangerous to allow him to immediately take such a difficult test. But the headmaster remained adamant. He calmly stated that everything would be fine, and the beast man would realize everything when she saw it. Hearing the commotion around him, Noah turned around and looked in surprise at the crowd of students sitting on the bleachers. Noah squinted and looked at the purple ball in his hands again. Then, tossing it into the center of the arena, he perplexedly muttered, "Why is everyone making such a fuss?" When the ball touched the ground, a huge club of dust kicked up, rising high up. Soon, the dark silhouette of a knight appeared amongst the dusty veil, one eye glowing with a bright purple light. Glancing over, Noah quietly noticed that the yellow ball knight was almost as big. But as he got a better look at him, the boy felt his breath catch with fear. Seeing the knight continue to grow, Noah opened his mouth in shock and shouted, "What? How much longer is he going to grow?" The knight grew to 6 meters and clutched a huge Morgenstern in his hands. Now Noah was panicked. He had no idea how to defeat such a monster. The students sympathized with the transferred student. Many of them were seeing the 7th battle stage for the first time, and had no idea how such a huge knight could even be defeated. Noah laughed nervously and shouted, "Are you kidding me? How can I beat him?" Looking around the stands, he realized that unlike yesterday's fight, there were a bunch of people watching him now, which only made things more difficult. While Noah pondered what to do, the knight wasted no time and went on the attack. Noah jumped aside at the last moment, narrowly avoiding the blow. The knight's fist slammed into the floor, shattering it with a deafening thud. Screaming, Noah rushed away, trying desperately to increase the distance between himself and the monster. He didn't stop, moving in an arc just to avoid the next blow. When he reached a relatively safe distance, he stopped abruptly, and breathing heavily, tried to gather his thoughts. Panic gripped him. Just a little more, and he could have died on his first day of school. The students were animatedly discussing Noah. One girl suggested that he was just running very fast, but her friend said it was the amplification magic often used for evasion. Eloise remarked judgmentally that even in the exam, Noah was engaging in utter nonsense. Seeing that the knight was preparing to attack, Noah instantly sprang into action. The moment the knight forcefully slammed his fist on the spot where Noah had been standing a second ago, the guy had already jumped up, aiming for the opposite side of the arena. The student marveled at his ability to jump, but her friend pointed out that Noah was just using magic. Realizing that the blows were not reaching their target, the knight decided to use the Morgenstern. In a split second, he unleashed his weapon at Noah with such speed that the guy had no chance to dodge. Standing erect, the knight brought the Morgenstern down with force, and the heavy, spiked weapon swung straight at Noah. Noah is in a panic. Hanging upside down, he suddenly remembers his past. Then a gentle female voice asked him not to use magic against humans. And little Noah, lifting a heavy stool above his head, exclaimed indignantly, "So what if I used wind magic?" His mother reminded Noah that his father had been taken into the army precisely for using magic. She worried that the same thing might happen to her son. Noah didn't take her words seriously, and easily used wind magic to make it easier on himself. Now the stool was hovering above his hands, and he didn't have to strain. Seeing this, the woman cried out sharply, "Noah, stop it at once!" The boy obeyed, reversed the spell, and the stool was back in his hands. His mother sternly reminded him that he was forbidden to demonstrate magic in public. It was too dangerous. Then she suddenly moved closer, which surprised the boy. The woman hugged her son tightly and whispered anxiously, "Please don't show your magic, even if you really want to." But now Noah knew, if he obeyed his mother, he simply wouldn't survive. Gritting his teeth, he drew a magic circle, concentrating the power of the wind in his palms. He then created a powerful airstream and aimed it straight towards the Morgenstern, trying to knock the weapon off its trajectory. A strong gust changed the motion of the weapon, and the heavy spiked ball flew straight into the barrier of the arena. Morgenstern hit the barrier with force, shattering it. Professor Mim was furious. Noah had acted recklessly and destroyed the defenses she had set up. A moment later, a huge hole formed in the barrier, and debris rumbled downward. The students watched in shock. Sharp pieces of the barrier flew toward the podium, hitting the students. There were frightened screams as people covered their heads with their hands, trying to protect themselves. Fortunately, not a single piece of shrapnel did any damage. In the next instant, they just hovered in the air. The audience breathed a sigh of relief, deciding that the defense system had worked. But soon, one of the female students cried out in horror, pointing at the new student, "He did it!" Noah actually picked up all the debris and used wind magic to hold it in the air. He had used this spell in secret before, but now he had a good reason to use it in front of everyone. Noah exclaimed loudly, "But for the sake of justice, I will be a disrespectful son!" Then he swung his arms, and the debris he was holding flew at the knight with great velocity. There wasn't much point in that, however. Noah himself realized that such small fragments would not seriously harm the knight. A cloud of dust rose around the knight, but there was not a scratch on him. At that moment, his eyes flashed with a bright violet light as he activated his ability. The knight took aim at Noah, preparing to attack. But suddenly his gaze shifted to the bleachers. He began to take aim at the students watching the fight. "Extra large number of hostiles detected. Attacking. Attacking." His cold voice rang out. He then pointed the self-shooter at the crowd. Noah, seeing the knight aiming at the students, cried out in horror, "What?" The students begin to panic as they realize that the knight is out of control and intends to attack them. But they don't have time to escape. The knight instantly unleashes a hail of spears in their direction. Everyone rescues as they can. Some rush away, trying to dodge, and some are frozen in fear, covering their heads with their hands. Turning to the bleachers, Noah shouts in rage, "What the hell? What is he doing?" Even Eloise, who was initially skeptical of the situation, tensed up. She realized that this seventh stage was a real madness. Cady screamed with all his might, begging the professor to stop this madness if he didn't want students to die here. Noah turned to the professor and the principal. "Things are out of control. The exam must be stopped immediately." But the teacher was too absorbed in thinking about the broken barrier. She studied the drawing of the barrier, wondering why it was not thick enough. Noah couldn't believe that at a time like this, when students were in danger, Professor Mim wasn't even paying attention to what was happening. Grabbing his head, he shouted, What the hell is going on here? And this is called a school? At that moment, the knight took advantage of Noah's distraction and struck him sharply with his fist. But thanks to his quick reaction, the boy managed to dodge, avoiding a collision with the giant. The principal, observing the situation, wondered perhaps he had overestimated the new student's abilities. Noah turned around and looked at the knight, thinking that if he had gotten this far, he had no choice but to defeat this bulky monster. But how could he fight such a piece of armored iron with wind magic alone? Suddenly it hit him. He would need a little help to win. Without any embarrassment, he turned to Eloise again, calling her crazy. The girl exclaimed indignantly, "What?" Turning to her, Noah bluntly asked her to give him some fire. Eloise frowned unhappily. Why was he giving out orders? Besides, he was taking an exam now, so he should be able to handle it on his own. Pointing at the huge knight, Noah shouted, "And how do you expect me to handle him alone? Or do you want everyone here to die?" Eloise Elsigran swallowed nervously, realizing that Noah's words contained a sliver of truth. In an instant, she applied her firepower. She raised her hands up and surrounded herself with a huge flame. At the same moment, she declared that Noah's insolence knew no limit. When the fireball reached a considerable size, Eloise threw it sharply towards the knight. Noah smiled broadly and admitted that it was true. Then he gathered a powerful stream of wind around him. The magical wind completely surrounded Noah, and he raised his hand, creating a vortex above his head. The vortex was insignificant at first, but gradually its power grew. In an instant, Noah channeled a huge stream of wind into the flames that reached the knight. The wind intensified the fire, giving Noah a chance to win and save the students. While in the center of the flames, the knight desperately fought back, and his eye glowed, a sign that he intended to use his abilities. Noah didn't give it a chance, however. He straightened his arm and clenched his fist tightly, affecting a stream of air. The whirlwind intensified, setting the flames alight. In that instant, the fire exploded like a giant bomb, leaving the knight no chance of escape. A few seconds later, the flames disappeared, and as the smoke cleared, onlookers saw the knight begin to disintegrate into pieces. Everyone watched him in amazement, and one student exclaimed, "Translated." Noah watched the defeated knight with his mouth open and continued the student's words. "Handled it." Realizing his triumph, he shouted joyfully and jumped up on the spot, raising one hand to celebrate his victory. In a panic, the teacher shrieked, "My precious robot golem!" Noah gave a thumbs up and turned to his strange assistant and complimented her on her excellent teamwork. The girl sighed heavily, looked down at him, and declared that he was being too childish. Professor Mim interrupted their conversation in an instant with her ringing shout, "Noah, Eloise, get to the professor's office now!" After a while, Noah strolled through the corridors of the academy. There were shouts of joy from all sides, and the boys called him their hero, while Eloise followed him silently. Eloise remarked that Noah's action was unwise. Noah countered that if she thought so, she could handle her own fire. With her hands folded across her chest, Eloise noted that she had helped from the bottom of her heart, and Noah had treated her ungratefully. Eloise shouted angrily, "Do you really want to finish what you started yesterday?" Noah mockingly replied, "Are you really going to summon your werewolf again? And are you incapable of doing anything without me?" Upon entering the professor's office, the boys continued their argument. Eloise declared that Noah would regret his words, and he replied caustically, "As you wish." Professor Mim, clearing her throat, asked, "Until when are you going to fight?" The boys turned away from each other and fell silent, trying not to involve the professor in their squabble. Professor Mim folded her arms across her chest and asked, "Why do you think I called you here?" Noah laughed and assumed the professor wanted to thank him for his heroic passing of the exam. At the same second, the professor slapped her hand on the table and declared that Noah was deeply mistaken. She explained that Noah asked for help on the exam, which is a violation of the rules. Because Eloise supported him, she also violated the established norms. Rising up, Professor Mim exclaimed loudly, "Exam cheating! Breaking the rules! You're both in last place!" When the boys heard this, they cried out in one voice, "What?" They couldn't believe they had been so offended when they had literally saved everyone from a deadly threat. While Eloise was in a stupor, Noah pointed to himself and said that it was ridiculous because he had saved everyone. Knowing he couldn't do it alone, he decided to ask for help. Professor Mim pointed her finger at him and pronounced, "Who asked you to save everyone? Do you think the academy will let the students die? The exam evaluates your strength, and defensiveness has 2 steps. Eloise didn't understand how it had happened. Usually ranked first, she was now in last place. Soon Eloise looked at Noah with fury, and he realized from her look that she was mentally scolding him. Professor Mim agreed that it might seem offensive, and offered to make the boys some suggestions. Eloise grabbed Noah by his school uniform and was about to punch him in the face, but stopped when she heard the professor's words. She and Noah asked at the same time, Proposal? She said. Professor Mim stated that the publication of the results could be delayed for a week at her discretion. She agreed to delay publication, but on one condition. Noah and Eloise must complete the assignment. Eloise asked thoughtfully, wondering what kind of assignment we were talking about. Placing the paperwork on the table, Professor Mim announced the assignment. Teaching basic magic to a transfer student who did not attend classes in the first semester. The professor was referring to Noah. The assignment is that he must pass the exam she has prepared in a week. Eloise interjected, "Why should I study for this?" The professor replied that if the girl refused to study, she would have to accept failing the exam. Then Eloise clenched her fist with all her anger. Her only regret now is that she didn't kill Noah the first time they met, when she had every chance to do so. Eloise sighed heavily and accepted the proposed rules. She declared that she would teach Noah the basics of magic, and grudgingly grabbed her palm over her face. Noah, meanwhile, raised his hands happily and said he was fine with it. Professor Mim asked the students to begin their studies, and noted that Noah should adapt well to the academy. She then asked how quickly he would be able to do so. Noah replied that the academy was a normal place to learn magic, with no secret passageways, and assumed he would adapt quickly. The professor refuted his words, explaining that in addition to magic, they teach elemental magic here: water, fire, wind, light, and darkness. The academy also teaches summoning to talented students. In addition, the academy trains technicians and magical engineers, and there are students of various majors here. Hearing this, Noah grinned and remarked that the place was much harder than he had expected. Eloise thought he was too ignorant of the teacher. As Professor Mim stood up, she noticed that the principal rarely accepted transfer students in the middle of the semester, and asked, "What family and what kingdom are you from, Noah?" Noah smiled and replied that he was from Stiadan and was not of noble descent. He was a commoner. The professor looked away thoughtfully and remarked that this was quite unusual, for a commoner with such magical power usually had a different fate. Noah interrupted the teacher, continued her reasoning, and said mockingly, "He is being sent off to die a miserable death." Professor Mim folded her arms across her chest, looked at Noah appraisingly, and asked, "Do you know how to summon magical creatures?" Noah, raising his thumb, declared that even without summoning, his wind magic remained the most powerful. The professor explained that he would eventually master the art of summoning as well, and after finishing the conversation, she asked Eloise to escort the student to the dormitory. A furious Eloise shrieked, "What? I don't want to! I don't have to do this!" The professor took one look at the documents and sternly warned that there were serious consequences for not cooperating. Gritting her teeth, Eloise remained silent, holding back her growing anger. Finally, she agreed to escort Noah to the dormitory. Along the way, she blamed him for failing her exam, and Noah didn't understand why she blamed him, since in his opinion, everything happened because of her. Noah ended up in the principal's office because of the strange individual's harassment, and thanks to Eloise, the monster almost got his revenge the next day. When she heard Noah call her crazy again, Eloise got angry. A flame erupted in her palm, a fiery aura lit up around her, and she asked, "Do you really want to live so badly that you keep hitting on me?" Suddenly, Eloise realized that only a short time ago she had intended to forgive Noah for the sake of the professor's honor, and after thinking it over, she calmed down. Noah, noticing her stop, asked why she wasn't going further, adding that she wanted to get to her dorm sooner and finally get some rest. Smiling, Eloise twirled a strand of hair around her finger and said, "The headmaster must have been looking for you. You're not the type who can't find your way alone, are you?" These words deeply affected Noah. He replied that the way was not difficult for him, for he was the city's decision-maker, and nothing was impossible for him. Eloise grinned and insisted that Noah should listen to her carefully. She then explained that the dormitory he had broken into was a girls' dormitory, and reminded him that the principal's office was in the first room of the right-hand corridor on the first floor. Noah looked at her doubtfully and said that the dormitory was probably not located there, and assumed that Eloise was lying to him. Eloise turned her back and pronounced, "Believe it or not, it's up to you. If you break into the sorority again, you'll be considered inadequate, and because of your appearance, you'll be misunderstood." Noah furrowed his brows and studied her face closely, trying to figure out if her words were sincere or just a brazen lie. Anyway, Eloise left, leaving Noah alone. He had no choice but to take her word for it and head towards the building. Noah grabbed the handle and swung the door sharply open on the first floor, greeting his neighbor cheerfully. He was about to say his name, but when he saw the stern man at the table, he stopped talking. The professor, frowning, asked again, "Your name?" Seeing the Professor Cyrus sign, Noah felt uncomfortable. The man adjusted his glasses and called his behavior impolite. The guy sincerely apologized, after which he continued his search for a hostel. He soon found a large building that appeared to be a dormitory. Meanwhile, Eloise looked out the window and laughed loudly. "You really are an idiot! It took so much effort to find the dormitory." When Noah heard that, he clenched his fist and angrily remarked that she had pointed out the wrong place to him on purpose. There was nothing funny about that, he thought. The girl smirked, got into bed, and lazily remarked that Noah had himself to blame. He had been rude to her too often. Hugging the toy doll, Eloise yawned and tossed it before going to bed. From now on, please don't get cocky. As a child, her mother told her the legend of a mysterious family of wizards who could control fire. The girl's mom held a toy wolf in her hands and declared that the powerful family was capable of controlling even magma. Eloise listened to the story with delight and interest, exclaiming how amazing it was. Meanwhile, the mom revealed that there was also an adorable princess in this family tending to the mysterious wolf, and then handed her daughter a red wolf doll. The girl gladly accepted the toy and asked enthusiastically, "That charming princess, that's me, isn't it?" At this moment, the girl was sleeping soundly next to her favorite toy wolf. Suddenly, a mouse crept into the room through the ajar door. The magical toy wolf immediately reacted to the mouse. Its eyes lit up, and it took aim at the little beast. While the girl slept, the wolf rose and stared at the mouse with a piercing gaze. Then the wolf walked over to the mouse and stood in front of it, scaring it with its intimidating appearance. The mouse was greatly frightened and in a hurry ran away through the same door through which it had entered. Then the toy wolf returned to his usual place, lay down next to his mistress, and sighed heavily, going to sleep. Meanwhile, Noah lies in his bed, seized with rage at Eloise's act, which he finds repugnant. Hearing snoring nearby, Noah realized he had forgotten something important and turned his head toward the source of the sound. He saw that his roommate was sound asleep despite what was happening. Suddenly, Noah realized that he had forgotten to write a note about completing the task he had come here for. He got up and made his way to his desk, pulling up a chair to sit down. Noah picked up a quill and began to write down a progress report. In his report, he indicated that the wolf doll had been successfully delivered, and added that he had managed to sneak inside, whereupon he was enrolled as a student. This seemed absurd, for he had never gone to school before. Noah smiled and said that he shouldn't fool around about getting into the academy, and right now he should focus on earning money and filling his wallet with gold coins. As promised to Professor Mim, Eloise Elsigran took it upon herself to teach Noah the basics of magic. Raising a finger, she spoke sternly. "Do you understand me? Every day, 30 minutes of practice during lunch. Not a second more." Then, touching her bangs, she sighed irritably and mumbled why she was wasting her time on something like this. Then she sighed irritably and muttered why she was wasting her time with this. Noah just spread his hands and grinned. If she kept this up, he'd just stop coming to class. He reminded her that he had received a special invitation from the headmaster himself, which meant that even if Eloise failed the exam, she wouldn't be expelled. One failure wasn't the end of the world. Hearing this, the girl abruptly raised her head and exclaimed, "What?" The panic was instantaneous. She'd never failed, and failing an exam was unthinkable. But if Noah really refused to study, she'd be in for a disaster. She is the future head of the Silgard family. Her duty is to be strong and bring glory to her family. Noah noticed her consternation and smirked, realizing that his simple but effective blackmail had worked. He shook his head and tossed it lazily. "Maybe I'll do magic after all, if you ask me nicely." The girl clenched her teeth, glared angrily at him, and muttered, "Please." Then she took a deep breath, determined that fear should not get the better of her. Inside Eloise were conflicting feelings. Fear mixed with rage, but suppressing her anger, she made concessions. The girl began to persuade Noah to take up magical training. Noah grinned and agreed, since he was being begged. When Eloise turned away, he added mockingly, telling her not to get angry, but to just go to practice with him. Then he asked what classes they had today. The girl turned sharply and coldly stated that he could only speak to her during class. After that, she turned away and silently headed forward. Noah, watching her, only sighed. Why do you have to make everything so complicated? When he entered the classroom, he was immediately surrounded by students. They admiringly discussed how talented he was, and one even asked where he had learned wind magic. Noah only smirked and replied cryptically that such secrets were not given away for free. He explained that he was willing to share his knowledge, but only for a good fee. At that moment, Eloise Elsigrun entered the auditorium. The murmur of voices died down as everyone turned to the sound of her confident footsteps. Noah noticed how the atmosphere changed instantly. Friendliness evaporated, and tension filled the space. The students glanced around, as if checking to see if each of them was ready to carry out Eloise's revenge plan. One of them created a water balloon in the palm of his hand and grinned evilly, anticipating the spectacle. Noah noticed this and sighed heavily. It was obvious to him that Eloise, who called herself the heiress of the family, was actually an outcast. He wanted to ignore the situation, but his conscience wouldn't let him. In the next moment, the disciple threw a water balloon at Eloise's back. The spell was rapidly approaching. In a moment, it would hit the girl. The water ball began to stretch, turning into a long water beam. But before the spell could reach its target, Noah used wind magic to redirect it to the side. The apprentice who had cast the spell froze in shock. Then his face contorted with rage. Clenching his fists, he spat out angrily, "That little—" Noah meanwhile hummed carelessly to himself, averting his gaze as if he were completely uninvolved. Hearing the commotion behind her, Eloise glanced around and looked thoughtfully at the gathered boys. Soon the ringing voice of Professor Mim was heard, followed by the sound of her footsteps. She asked everyone to take their seats and carried several small bombs as she made her way to the pulpit. Smiling, the professor placed the bombs on the table and announced, "Today's class is magic engineering. Before we begin, would anyone like to work with this bomb and give a demonstration?" The audience fell into a tense silence. No one dared to respond. Throughout the day, Noah had managed to notice that his purple-haired classmate loved pranks, and how could he leave him out of the fun? With a slight smirk, he created a small vortex under the desk, then directed the airflow directly towards this guy, causing him to involuntarily shift in his seat. As a result of the clever trick, Ilan suddenly stretched his arm forward, catching the professor's attention. Mim immediately asked if he wanted to come out and demonstrate his skills. Ilan scratched the back of his head and muttered that summoners didn't have to know about engineering. Then he added that perhaps Bernan would do better. The professor, however, snorted and said that she only taught able students. She wondered if he should ask his father, Principal Rollins, to keep a closer eye on his son. After these words, Ilan decided not to argue any further. Reluctantly, but still he went to the pulpit for the demonstration. When Noah learned that Ilan was the director's son, he immediately saw him as a potential investor. He thought that a friendship with this student could be very good for his wallet. Ilan grabbed the bomb with trembling hands and yanked it nervously, grumbling quietly, "How did I ever get to this point?" Suddenly, Kadi volunteered to give a demonstration. Professor Mim smiled and allowed him to put his engineering skills to the test. As Kadi walked over to the bomb and began to dismantle it, the professor asked him to set an example for everyone and reminded him that magic wasn't everything. Then, turning to the students, she asked a question. What would they do if they couldn't use the summoning in battle, or exhausted all the magic power? There was a thoughtful silence in the classroom. After that, the professor looked directly at Ilan and repeated her question. The boy clenched his teeth, feeling awkward because he didn't have an exact answer. Correcting her glasses, Professor Mim remarked that this mechanism could save their lives on the battlefield one day. Noah, meanwhile, simply fell asleep with his head resting on his desk. His behavior showed complete indifference to the subject and obvious disrespect for the professor. Mim quickly noticed the sleeping student, and her face contorted with anger. The other students also saw that Noah had fallen asleep. They assumed that he was just exhausted after a hard battle and using wind magic to the limit of his strength. However, the professor didn't bother to wake him up. Instead, she walked over to Eloise and looked at her carefully. Professor Mim raised her ring finger, reminding Eloise that she only had a week left to teach her transferred student the basics of magic. The girl sighed and covered her face tiredly with her palm. The thought flashed through her mind that Noah was just a hopeless case. A few minutes later, it was time for lunch. Today, the dining room was serving juicy, flavorful chicken, and everyone could enjoy it. Eloise wasn't going to refuse either. She was hungry from the class and decided to sit down at the table. The girl pushed back her chair, but as she looked at it, she noticed that someone had left a water chestnut on the seat. She even knew who had done it. Eloise looked up and met Ilan's eyes. At that moment, Noah's voice was heard. He came closer, and sitting down, he said, "Since you're loitering, I'll take this seat." He then praised the food at the academy with a smile. Ellen cast a glance at Noah, who was about to sit down, but something alerted him. Noah lifted himself slightly, examined the chair, and exclaimed, "Hey! Who left the water chestnut here? I almost sat on it." Then, without thinking, he flicked the chestnut with his palm, and it flew sideways, right into Ilan's plate. In the next instant, the water chestnut fell straight into Ilan's soup with a splash. While Noah was quietly enjoying the fresh bread, the purple-haired guy gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. "He's always bothering me," he muttered through his teeth. Ilan decided he couldn't take it anymore. He walked up to Noah, not hiding his annoyance, and asked loudly what kind of family he was. Noah nonchalantly took another bite of bread and calmly replied that he had no family. Ellen hummed, realizing that Noah was only a commoner. Hearing this conversation, the students looked at each other in surprise. They couldn't believe that the powerful wind mage was a commoner. Upon learning the truth, the students immediately began to whisper. Dozens of questions arose in their heads, the main one being, What was an ordinary person doing in their academy? Ellen grinned and asked with a sneer what a commoner like him was forgetting at their academy. With an obvious sneer in his voice, he added, "Are you even able to pay your tuition? Or should we hide our wallets now in case you rip us off?" The students laughed, picking up on his joke, but it didn't hurt him at all. He smiled, finding Elon's words amusing. Noah, pointing a thumb at himself, grinned. "Isn't strength more important than family and money?" Those words made Elon speechless for a moment. Eloise, who had been listening intently to their conversation, hesitated. Normally she wouldn't have interfered, but Elon had caused her to miss her lunch break, and so now she didn't mind voicing her opinion. She appealed to Elon to be more restrained in his remarks. Then she added that if he continued to cause trouble, the principal would know about it right away. Besides, he was already bullying the transfer student, so there was a reason to report it now. The only question is whether to complain to the academy principal, who is also Elon's father. Hearing this, Elon only grinned and replied that he understood. He assumed that since Eloise was about to lose her aristocratic status, she had decided to join the commoners. Then, bowing his head mockingly, he added that a fallen noblewoman and a commoner looked like a perfect match. His voice suddenly became harsher, and he hissed furiously, "How long will you continue to be so self-righteous? We'll see." Some time passed. Noah continued to learn magic from Eloise. The girl patiently explained to him the basics of the theory. At one point, Noah, calling her a teacher, perplexedly asked why he needed theory when he could go straight to practice. Eloise raised her index finger and calmly argued that, first of all, she was not his teacher. She had only been teaching him for a week, and that was not enough time to deserve such treatment. Noah only shrugged and grinned, noting that with her temperament it was to be expected. Eloise could barely contain her irritation. She mentally reminded herself that she only had to hold out for a week, and then this duty would no longer be her problem. Then she added, "And secondly, are you even capable of distinguishing theory from practice at your level?" Without waiting for an answer, she invited Noah to explain how he himself understood magical power. In response, Noah created a small air vortex in the palm of his hand and asked confidently, "Magical power? Is that what you're talking about?" Eloise frowned, puzzled. She explained that Noah was demonstrating magic now, but she was asking specifically about magic power. The guy scratched the back of his head awkwardly and wondered if they were different concepts. Eloise called Noah an idiot and promised to explain everything by example so that even he would understand. She drew symbols of the different elements on the board and explained that the world is made up of water, fire, wind, light, and darkness. Eloise continued that Noah uses the element of wind because his body is filled with magical power. She interrupted her speech, noticing that Noah seemed to be falling asleep in class and not listening to her at all. At that moment, she created a small flame on her index finger. Pointing the flame toward Noah, she slapped his face to keep him from falling asleep again. Eloise demanded that Noah listen to her carefully and explained that magic power is a source of energy. Then she asked a question. What would we do if this power was exhausted? Rubbing his burnt forehead, Noah replied that if the magic ran out, they should just run away. Eloise exclaimed in surprise, realizing that Noah had always relied only on his inner magical power. She was dumbfounded by his stupidity. Eloise sternly stated, "Idiot, your body will break. But that's your business, I don't care." Tapping the chalk on the blackboard, Eloise continued her lecture, explaining that the energy of the world is divided into two categories. The first category is innate magical power. The second is energy that permeates everything around you like air. She suggested that by relying only on inner strength, Noah had probably exhausted its potential. Putting her finger to her lips, Eloise concentrated and extracted small magical rings from the surrounding energy. Watching her, Noah noticed that the discussion of magic sounded monotonous. Eloise immediately objected, pointing loudly at Noah that this was about magic power, not magic. After creating a fiery flame over her finger, she continued the lecture and emphasized that Noah must distinguish between magic and magical power. She asked him to channel energy through his finger without using internal force. Noah, seeing no use for it, asked, "What is the use of using the hands without the body being involved?" Eloise gave Noah a stern look and demanded that he follow her instructions without asking stupid questions. Noah agreed, raised his finger, closed his eyes, and concentrated, channeling energy through his finger with no inner strength. After a moment, a stream of air rushed toward the finger, centering over it. When a small vortex appeared above Noah's finger, he felt a strange sensation. His finger felt as if it were weighed down, and he thought that Eloise had tricked him again. Eloise smiled broadly and suggested Noah snap his fingers if the feeling of heaviness increased. Noah took her advice, snapping his thumb and forefinger while the vortex remained above his hand. Instantly, the small whirlwind turned into a huge hurricane that swept across the classroom. The hurricane went around Eloise, creating a massive wall of air between her and Noah. so powerful the wind lifted the hair of both of them with ease. The strength of the hurricane was such that it broke all the windows in the classroom. Glancing at his hands, Noah said cautiously, Do I have that kind of power?" Eloise smiled, realizing that Headmaster Rollins had not made a mistake in accepting such a talented student into the academy. At this time, Principal Rollins was talking to his son in his private office. He had heard rumors about Elan's meeting with the transfer student. Ellen felt anxious, realizing that someone had already told him what had happened in the dining room. Rollins lowered his gaze thoughtfully, praised Elan, and then asked him to continue to guide Noah in discovering his abilities. Elan objected, saying that as a commoner and not a summoner, Noah only used wind magic. He did not think it was a good idea to put much faith in him. Putting his quill on the table, the principal calmly replied that Noah would soon succeed. Rollins was confident that Noah had hidden limitless potential that would soon manifest itself. Roland's gaze turned stern as he reminded Elan, "Just as I did the moment I accepted you as my adopted son,